Hello, friends. So President Trump has once again threatened Iran that if they do not open the Strait of Hormuz within the next 48 hours, then he is going to go after their power plants. And this is creating a new wave of anxiety in the market. On Friday, we thought perhaps we're done with this war. And then we see this tweet. Now, when you attack a power plant of another country, you're not just impacting their military, but more importantly, you are disrupting a daily life flow of people. Can you imagine how many people are suffering from life-threatening diseases, people who are in hospitals, kids going to schools, colleges, and many other important things that we do that depends on electricity. Without that, survival becomes very, very difficult. So obviously, not just that you already have military targets on your back, but all of a sudden now you're bringing civilian targets on your back as well. And then, as I have said previously, it's not just about the United States and Israel, because sooner or later they will leave the Gulf states and come back home. But then what happens in that area? What happens with all the relationships? What happens with the Strait of Hormuz going forward? So all of these questions needs to be answered with calm mind. So I'm going to go back into history a little bit and try to explain to you that why this particular war is going to have consequences way far beyond that most of us are imagining right now. So it's important that we talked about it. Now, those of you guys who don't know me, my name is Deepak. I run a tax firm called Tax Code Advisors. You can go to taxcodeadvisors.com and then reach out to me from there to discuss anything related to taxes. If you want to support me, well, very simple. You can choose me as your tax advisor. I can help you file your taxes or do tax planning for you. You can join a coaching program to learn about finance. Again, all of that on taxcodeadvisors.com. So let's talk about what's happening right now. Is it a war of terrorism, war of nuclear weapons, war of oil, misjudged calculations? Okay, I'll let you choose what this is. But what we do know for sure is that oil, one of those things that we cannot live without, at least not yet. I mean, oil is used in everything. We move people, we move goods using oil, in your car, planes, ships, everything use oil. So when prices of oil goes up, it impacts everything, and not just transportation. We use oil in everything other than transportation, in plastic, fertilizer, chemicals. Everything you use on daily life probably use plastic in one way or the other. And this creates a very big global oil market. Countries are constantly buying and selling oil, and some countries have an advantage because they have a lot of oil, so they're able to produce a lot of oil. For example, Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Qatar, Bahrain, all of these, all the Gulf states, they have a lot of oil. On the other hand, then we have countries like India, Japan, Pakistan. There's no oil. So this creates a massive demand for oil, buyers and sellers. And United States wants to win every war. That's why we are everywhere. And some wars we can win because of what we have, and some wars we can't win because we don't have those resources. For example, if you take a look at China, well, China has a supply chain. China has manufacturing. Can we really create that kind of supply chain here in the United States? Can we create that kind of manufacturing in the United States? Of course not. Not possible, at least not yet. Maybe someday, once we have technology, robotics, and all that, maybe we might be able to catch up, but at least not today. So China has an upper hand, and they have rare earth. Again, we are kind of dependent on them as well. Similarly, even back in old days, these problems existed. So at the end of World War II, the U.S. economy and the manufacturing jobs in the U.S. were doing just fine, but the rest of the world was not. So I think people will remember. So you think what's happening with tariffs, what's happening with the war in Iran right now, at the back of countries' leaders' head, they're probably thinking, maybe this is going to repeat again. That means the only beneficiary at the end of the day is going to be the United States. Now, United States took advantage of that situation after World War II because at the Bretton Woods Conference of 1944, all the countries agreed to make the US dollar the center of global financial system. Why? Because US made a promise. US made a promise that it will allow those countries to exchange their US dollars for gold. So other countries Well, like, oh, that's cool. Gold is heavy to move. Gold, it requires a lot more security. But with US dollar, we can do a lot of these things in an easier way. So if United States can take over the security of gold, we don't have to move things around. There's no transportation cost. And whenever we need it, we can go to the United States and exchange our dollar for gold. That sounds like a pretty reasonable system. And then on top of that, United States economy is doing very well. The jobs are still here. So people trusted the US. And other countries took one more step beyond that. So back in the days, a lot of countries were backing their currencies with gold. But now, because dollar could be exchanged for gold at any time, other countries decided to peg their currencies against the US dollar as well. So if you guys remember India, for example, I think back in the days, the 1 rupee was equal to what, I don't know, $3 or $4, something like that. I don't know how they came up with that number, but that's how it was pegged for many, many years. And then obviously recently, since 1970s, you're seeing that a rupee is getting depreciated. And the reason behind that is because in 1971, President Nixon decoupled the US economy from the gold standard. So this transitioned the world into what we call a fiat currency economy right now. So pretty much all the countries in the world are fiat currency economies. In other words, what is fiat currency? Fiat currency is a government issued money that is not backed by any physical commodity whatsoever. If there's nothing to back it with, how do you value the currency? Why would rupee will be certain value versus Iran will be certain value versus US dollar will be certain value? Well, so the reason behind that is the US dollar drives its value from trust and economic stability. So when other country says, oh, United States, if we hold their dollar, we hold their currency, they are going to protect us. They are going to provide economic stability. They are not going to cheat us. So they put all their faith in the currency. And that's where the value comes from. So, for example, if you take a look at right now, United States has taken a lot of actions recently that has destabilized the world, create cracks in that trust, certainly in the last couple of years. But nonetheless, US is still the dominating currency in the world. And the reason for that is very simple. If I were to ask you today, what do you think about US economy over the next 1 year versus economy of Iran? Most of you will agree and say, well, I think United States economy is going to do very well. And then if I ask you, what do you think the financial policies that United States is going to implement that's going to drive that growth further, you'll probably say United States will come up with one plan or the other. And that is where the trust is coming from. So you're seeing the dollar is rising and the rest of the currencies are once again shaky. And, you know, US today is called the world currency because of that reason. But more importantly, the other reason is that all the other countries in the world hold large amount of it in their central bank. Why? Well, same reason you would hold gold for transactions, right? I mean, why do you carry a wallet? Why do you, pay in cash? Because you need to buy something. So if you are India, Japan, China, and you need to buy something on international markets, you need those US dollars to conclude that purchase. And if you don't have any dollars, how are you going to conclude that purchase? So why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because we need to go back to 1973 and look at the OPEC oil crisis. So back then, all the Gulf countries, especially the Arab world, was not really happy with Israel. And by the way, you have seen this President Trump push to make peace between Israel and Arab countries right now. Because if this was not the case, if he would not have done that, and I think he started that in his first administration, and he's continued to work on that. But if he would have not done that, then this crisis right now would have been really terrible. Like you would have seen oil prices already reaching $300, $400. And I'll explain to you why. So seems like the agenda behind this war did not just started a couple of weeks ago. It started, several years ago. So anyhow, back in 1973, Arab countries, like I said, mostly the oil producing countries, stopped selling oil to countries, not just Israel, but to any country that was supporting Israel in the war. And that included the US. This was done to gain, obviously, political leverage. And what happened? Oil prices quadrupled. That led to massive shortages and severe inflation in Western economies. So if you're reading the news about inflation going up, which right now, and by the way, I don't think a lot of this inflation related to war had really even kicked in, but even without that inflation, we are still looking at the annualized inflation of 9%. So you probably have seen all the home builder stocks kind of got sold off, mortgage stocks got sold off really, really hard because market is already pricing in that, hey, look, if inflation doesn't even, this oil related inflation hasn't even kicked in and we're already looking at annualized inflation of 8%, what is going to happen once this oil inflation kick in? And that's why and Iran knows this as well, by the way. They're not stupid people. So that's why they are keeping that pressure on, because they know that President Trump would have no choice but to give concessions to deal with this inflation problem. Anyhow, what did the United States do in 1973? Well, in response to this crisis, the US thought, what if we can go to Saudi Arabia, one of the largest producers of oil, and make an agreement with them? And the agreement would be, hey, look, we will provide you the security. We will send you the latest weapons. We will provide you the technology. In response, all you have to do is make sure that all the oil transactions that you do happens in the US dollar. That's all I want you to do. It's good for you because US dollar is going to continue to appreciate. So you're actually making more money. And then we will provide you the protection. So it's a good deal for you. And we just, come to some agreement. And, that worked. Saudi Arabia agreed. And then not just the Saudi Arabia agreed, then pretty soon all the other countries in that region also decided to go with the same system. So how does this system really work? Very simple. Every country needs oil. Oil is sold in the US dollars. So every country needs US dollars. So it was a very thought out process that how do we make sure that everybody in the world have a lot of US dollars? So for example, India, Japan have to have a US dollar reserve. Once they have that reserve, then they can trade. This created a lot of global demand for the US dollar. And we have really milked this system for many, many years. And we are arriving at a point that we have $39 trillion of debt. And the world is starting to question the United States that, hey, what's happening here? How long can you continue to distribute these dollars without any kind of ramification? So why does the United States wants to do this to begin with? Well, very simple. United States wants the dollar to be strong because everybody needs a dollar. So if dollar becomes weak, then the demand for US dollar will automatically diminish as well. This allows, because everybody needs dollar and have dollar and want to keep dollar in future as well. This allows the US government to borrow money more easily at the lower interest rate. Now you might be like, well, that doesn't really make sense. Well, it makes perfect sense. I give an example. Sometimes when I'm working with clients who have high net worth, it's so easy for them to get mortgages. Like, for example, if you had a nice, cushy job in IT during the COVID time, you might be able to get a loan for 2%, 2.2%, something like that, really low rates, versus many other people probably pay 3%, 3.25% on the same loan. So the more income you have, more cash flow you have, more stability you have, people see it as less risk and they are willing to give you a discount. And that's the same principle applies here in the United States that, hey, US has a good economy, stable economy, policies are stable. They're out there to protect the world. They're going to do the right thing. Because of that trust, United States is able to borrow cheaply. Well, guess not anymore, because we are already seeing that bonds are already hitting 5% because of this war. So this whole system enables the US financial system, like sanctions, to influence other countries. Why? Because if these other countries try to go against the United States, then United States can use that dollar as a weapon. So we saw that in the case of Iran. We saw that in the case of Ukraine war with Russia. So the whole idea is that one way or the other, we want to keep the rest of the world engaged in the dollar system. Now, once you have people trading in dollar, does that stop the cycle? No, it has this butterfly effect. And you can, by the way, create these similar kind of effects in your business as well, especially if you're into services and software and all that. Maybe that's a topic like how we can copy the same playbook and apply it. I mean, these are all financial products, right? So you can apply, like, for example, take a look at MSTR strategy. What are they doing? They saw, okay, this, whether you believe in Bitcoin or not, different story. But I'm just saying they saw that they could apply the same similar kind of strategy with Bitcoin, and that's what they did, and certainly made a lot of money until recently. Anyhow, so these oil producing countries don't just store a big pile of cash like gold, because once you have gold, what do? You get a locker and you put the gold in there and then forget about it. Well, the cool thing about US dollar is you can reinvest it. So you earn the dollar. Now you can reinvest it in the US government bond. You can buy American companies, stocks. You can invest in real estate. You can invest in global markets. So the dollar basically can be used. And cool thing about that is it flows back into the US financial system. That creates a wonderful loop, right? Countries buy oil with the dollars, oil producers earn dollars, oil producers invest those dollars back into the US assets, and this way the US dollar stays strong. However, there are some challenges. Countries like Russia, Venezuela, India, Pakistan have tried to trade oil in other currencies, euro, Chinese yuan, etc. BRICS trade alliance aim to reduce the global dependence on the dollar system. That's one of the things Trump is really angry about. Like, he's really feeling threatened. Like, okay, Iran, a different story, but you cannot really go after India, Pakistan, China, Russia, Venezuela all at the same time. Although Venezuela was an easy target because it's very close to the US. So they need to work out some way to deal with these countries. However, these countries are having a hard time really making any meaningful impact. Why? Well, switching currency disrupts contracts, hedging systems, insurance, and pricing models, because when these commodities are priced, they are priced based on the US system. So once you take the stability of that US system out, everything changes. The US dollar offers very high liquidity. You can move billions of dollars without crashing the market. For example, if you wanted to do the same with Indian currency or Chinese currency, it's going to have a major ramification. People are going to notice. And then United States dollar has the strong legal protection. Now, I know some of you guys might argue that that's not really the case, but at least on the paper it is. And so far, people do perceive it that way. So think of it like social media companies like Facebook or WhatsApp or YouTube. It's not easy to switch. Once you're on that platform, once you're hooked to that system, it's not that easy for you to just kind of move on to a different system, because there's a lot of switching costs, a lot of work you have to do. So can you do it? Yeah, you can. Some people can do it, people who have the capital. So in the world of oil, for example, who have the capital? Well, two countries probably obviously come to your mind, Russia and China. So Russia has certainly increased oil trade with China, and Russia is settling that in yuan. And I think for Russia, that's obvious. They don't care about the US dollar as much. Russia has settled some transactions in their own currency as well. Russia has certainly reduced the US Treasury holding. And that's not surprising because we put sanctions on them. China, on the other hand, is now promoting yuan-dominated oil contracts. So they're saying, hey, if you want to do, because we buy so much, we also have an economy. We also are big consumers. Why do we have to buy it in US dollar? Our currency is just as good. We're going to buy it in our own currency. And China is now encouraging trade settlements in their own local currency as well, not just oil, but other trades as well. So if you want to buy something, they say, hey, why don't, instead of we converting our yuan to dollars, why don't you convert dollars to yuan as well? So they are reducing the dollar use, as much as possible. So this is a gradual shift. It's not happening overnight, but it is slowly happening. And then you have to think about China in a bigger context. So China's effort to destabilize the dollar also extends to the gold market. So we have seen that China has been increasing buying gold, not just the gold that is produced in China, but they're buying it from everywhere as well. So China is using the gold market to break the US dollar global financial grip. This strategy is contributing to gold prices surging, for the last couple of years now. So in matter of fact, if I was China, I'll be really taking advantage of the gold prices right now. So don't be surprised 3 months down the road when the new numbers come out and you look at, oh my God, China really accumulated a lot of gold. Yeah, right now, if you are a Gulf country, sure, you got a problem. Your hotel industry is dead. Your real estate is dead. You cannot sell oil, and your transportation is dead. And most important, your tourism is dead. So if you think about all the Gulf countries, they don't really have any money coming in from anywhere. So what do you do to survive? Right now, people have made a lot of money on gold, so they're selling. Makes perfect sense. But on the other hand, what we say, one man's garbage is other man's treasure. So right now, Gulf countries have no choice. They are running into this liquidity problem right now, at least for the time being. So they're selling off gold. But on the other hand, countries like India and China are out there buying gold just like ever. So don't be surprised. So let's try to understand the system that will kind of give you a broader view. So this whole petrodollar systems gave the United States an extraordinary power over the global economy, not through merit alone, but through a deal made 50 years ago. So that's why I always say that sometimes I meet with clients who are super smart, they're intelligent, they have PhDs, but they lack people skill. They are not able to make a deal. They think they're the smarter ones and the other people are stupid. So what happens is they get stuck in a limbo. Now, they're not wrong. They are smart. They are intelligent. They do have knowledge. They can do great. They're absolutely right about that. But what they do is they just lack how to make a deal, how to appreciate other people, even when they are not as smart as you are. Okay. And that is done with creative thinking. On the other hand, I'll meet clients, they don't have PhDs. They barely even completed high school and they are making a ton of money. Why? Because they appreciate other people. They see good in them. They want to work with them. They want to, reward them. They have those skills that is required to build a successful business. Most companies, if you have employees, you try to pressure them too much, they're just going to leave. It doesn't really work. So every country in the world is basically forced to hold the US dollar just to access the basic resource right now, energy. So if you think about all the countries, I'm not talking about Gulf countries, but let's just say you're India, Japan, or elsewhere who don't really have any oil, but you have gold and you have US dollar. So when time comes where you need the oil, because you cannot survive it without oil, they would have no choice but to sell the US dollar and to sell the gold. Because you can live without the US dollar and the gold, but you cannot live without oil. Iran knows this, and that is why you're seeing this conflict getting more messier and messier. So this means that US economy and political decisions like interest rates, sanctions, money printing ripple out and affect every other nation, whether they like it or not. Countries that challenge US foreign policies can be cut off from the financial system entirely. The system creates a structural imbalance. The US can borrow cheaply and spend freely while other nations bear the cost through inflation and currency pressure. For individuals, it means the purchasing power of savings can be quietly eroded by decisions made in Washington, not in their own country. I'm not talking about the US citizen, I'm talking about the people who live in other countries. So if you were living in the other country, what would you do, right? So for example, if you're in India or in China, well, they can join or support trade blocs like BRICS to reduce dollar dependency. We're already seeing that. They can think about settling bilateral trade in local currencies to bypass the dollar system entirely. Again, we're seeing that. They can, listen to this, build up gold reserves as dollar independence store of value. We're seeing that as well. Like we can see that China and India has been aggressively buying gold and silver. They can also develop alternative payment system outside of US controlled financial infrastructure, which in the US, the most popular is SWIFT system. Anytime we don't like something that some other country is doing, what do they say? Hey, we're going to kick you out of the SWIFT system. That means you won't be able to do transaction with the rest of the world. Well, guess what? The world is building other system. For example, in India, we have UPI, and now that UPI is obviously getting extended into the other countries as well. Main point is that the world is gradually reducing US Treasury holding to limit exposure to the dollar policy. No matter what the administration tell us that, oh, that's not really true, blah, blah, blah. The reality is it's happening. You can see the signs of it everywhere, and that is the reason why it's frustrating for the United States. That's why there's so much pressure right now. That's why we're seeing all this political capital being spent on some of these areas that we have never really seen before, because this is for real. So now you may ask, well, Deepak, that's great, but now tell me, what can people, you and me, do about it? Because this is all handy-dandy, but it's out of my control. I mean, I can't control the US government. I can't control who's going to win the elections. I can't control other countries. I can't control wars. What can I do? Well, I'm going to give you guys with some suggestions, but let me remind you guys, I'm not an investment advisor, so I'm not here to tell you what to buy, what to sell. That's your business, or what time you sell. I'm a taxes advisor. I can certainly help you with taxes. If you genuinely want to learn about finance and really understand these things in more detail, I encourage you to join the coaching program and see where you go from there. All right. Number one, you need to work on liquidity. So if you are not able to generate cash, that is your biggest enemy. Not the government, not the wars, not the investment, not the lack of knowledge. First problem you got to solve in your life is to generate a lot of liquidity. Once you have that liquidity, then you need to think about diversifying into savings and investments. And those investments should not all be in the US dollar. You should think about diversifying beyond the US dollar based assets. How can you do that? Like, should I go buy one? Well, you certainly can, but I would rather do it by buying gold, silver, and other commodities as an hedge against the dollar devaluation. So I'm not saying that you sell off everything and just be in all that. I'm saying you should have those hedges up. And people sometimes get this wrong because you can make money off hedges, no problem. For example, I can make money when market is crashing or when I know company is going to down. Certainly, you can short those companies, make money. Those are risky bets. Sometimes you're going to win, but many times you're going to lose. But if you start treating hedges like hedges, I think you will have much better success rate. So keep that in mind. I would also suggest that you start paying attention to some of the things that I mentioned, and I'm going to talk more about those at the meetup. So if you guys are going to come this Tuesday to meet with me, we can certainly talk about the US dollar. We can talk about the credit risk. We can talk about gold, silver, what's happening in the real world and how everything is impacting right now. So once again, this Tuesday in Newark, California, I'll be available to do meetup with you guys. So pay attention to these trends that are happening. They are signaling a potential long-term shift. Which asset is going to hold value? Sometimes people think the markets are neutral. They're not neutral. All these trends will have a major impact on everything. Pay attention to BRICS. What kind of developments are happening there? What is China doing? That is going to help you understand that the petrodollar system is not permanent. See, many of us who are in our 40s, 50s might not even remember what happened in 1970. And that's why learning about history is so important. Because if you don't understand that, then you'll be surprised when something change in the world order. The global financial order, as we know, is slowly but visibly shifting. So pay attention to that, no matter what politics tell you, but you need to be able to pay attention to those cracks, especially if you're approaching the retirement age. So if you are in your 60s, I think you really should join the coaching program and try to understand these things. Now, you might say, Deepak, are you saying that things are going to get really messy this month? No, that's not what I'm saying. So the petrodollar system is not collapsing overnight. It is deeply embedded in the global trade, contracts, and financial infrastructure. You can't change that overnight. But cracks are forming, driven by geopolitics, sanctions, overreach, and the rise of China as a competing economic power. As more countries become powerful, such as India, and they start to challenge the US dominance, you are going to see United States once again reaching out and putting pressure on countries by using the tools they have: sanctions, geopolitics, US dollar, oil trade, etc. So the question is not if the system will change, but the real question you should ask is how fast it is going to change and what will replace it. And that is where the market is stuck right now. There is no clear alternative right now. Like, if it's not the US dollar, then what is it? I think, okay, this is just my guess. I think it all goes back to gold, because more and more countries are realizing that instead of relying on one currency, perhaps our forefathers already knew the answer. Stick with the most expensive commodity that is available to us, gold. So those who understand the system, governments, investors, and informed citizens alike, will be the best position to navigate what comes next. I'm open to debating these ideas, so please come to the meetup. We can have a chat or set up a discovery call. Go to taxcodeadvisors.com and reach out to me from there. So, today's video was really more about fundamentals, so you understand what is happening in the world order right now, because what's happening in Iran right now is going to have a major ramifications for many, many years to come. So no matter what side of politics you are on, we all going to have to pay for it. It's not going to be as simple as what it looks like. So I hope this helps. And I'll leave you with the couple of things that number one, I know there's a lot of negative headlines right now, so stay calm in this world. And number two, have a long-term vision. Don't get distracted by making some money here and there in the market because there's blood in the market, because things can change with one tweet and it can be quite dangerous. Thank you so much for spending your last 20, 30 minutes with me, and I'll see you next time.